it's been reported that both Everton and Nottingham Forest are expecting to be referred to an independent commission over breaches of the Premier League's profitability and sustainability regulations. I want to get into this in more detail with Simon in a second, but Martin, if you are Sean Dyche, say at Everton at the moment, you've already been kicked where it hurts regards the 10 points deduction. There they are, giving their best shot yesterday against Aston Villa, trying their darndest to win the game. And he's got to go into work this morning and wait for some kind of an announcement regards this. It ain't easy if you're Dyche at the moment. It ain't easy if you're Nuno Espirito Santo. You're trying to make progress, but all the while this is rumbling in the background.
Yeah, well, it's not easy for the clubs, never mind the managers. I think that, it's been quite some years now since Manchester City found themselves in trouble, 115 breaches apparently, and yet that's not been resolved. And if I was Everton or any of the other clubs, suddenly, right out of the blue, they were docked 10 points. Now, they may well have broken the rules, and they admitted that they did do, but it does seem really strange that Manchester City can avoid it in a way, perhaps because they've got fantastic lawyers. I don't really know about this here, but they have avoided it, and suddenly, almost seemingly out of the blue, Everton were docked these points. Now suddenly it's coming again, and Nottingham Forest could be culprits as well too. Yeah. So yeah, it's a strange one, and you don't know where you're standing. Everton did brilliantly to claw those points back. It takes a bit of effort. Then you start to lose a couple of games. They got a result at the weekend, but even so, it was it's really, really tough. And as a manager, what do you say to the players? Where do we stand? They'll be asking those particular questions themselves.
Well, Simon, why? I mean, the question here to me is, why are the Premier League able to bare their teeth with some clubs, whilst others are able to kick the can down the road? And I'm talking about Chelsea spending $1 billion in a year. I'm talking about Manchester City, as Martin mentioned.
Chelsea haven't been charged with anything.
No.
So Chelsea are not part of the conversation right now. And when they produce accounts which produce those problems, and then the Premier League will take a view. Sure. Manchester City's scenario is completely different, whether I like it or I don't. And I certainly think they have something to answer to. Their charges and their processes and what they're being alleged to have done is very different from straightforward accountancy principles over a 3-year cycle. Different, completely different. And Everton's position, as much as I agree with the idea that 10 points is a harsh sanction, they copped to it. They haven't missed financial fair play by £9 million, like people say.
Yeah.
They've missed it by 250 million, and they were allowed to make a series of adjustments, including COVID adjustments and interest payments on the stadium and costs of capitalisation of the stadium that they're building. All of that was allowed to be included, and they still missed it. So Everton's is not a £9 million problem as it's being characterised by certain people. It's a £250 million miss.
But should they not be allowed a bit of grace period to stabilise and recover? Sam, they've been hit once, and they took that right on the chin.
No, they didn't. They didn't take anything on the chin. They cried, and they've gone out and defended themselves against it. And they've got everybody that will listen to them to write letters and get involved, including the former Bank of England governor. So they've got themselves busy. They haven't taken it on the chin at all. And to be honest with you, neither would I expect them to, because they've got a sanction that's never been seen the likes of. I expected them to do some sort of appeal, but they've already copped to the culpability of it. Their chief executive, their finance director came out with the most ridiculous statement, and in the witness evidence given by their owner, he talks about the need to spend money because they had no midfield.
Well,
what's that got to do with the price of cheese when you're observing to financial fair play?
On that very point, Everton's interim CEO, Colin Chong, said this when the 10 points was announced.
Myself and everybody at the club are shocked and disappointed by the ruling of the Premier League Commission. We believe the sanction is disproportionate and wholly unjust. The club's view is that the harshness and severity of this punishment are neither a fair nor a reasonable reflection of the evidence that was submitted to the Commission. For that reason, the club intends to appeal the outcome before the Premier League Appeals Board. This is a sporting sanction that directly impacts supporters. The club and our players and staff and our fans will stick together in the face of what the club believes to be an unprecedented and disproportionate sanction. As we enter the next phase of this legal process, there is no further comment we can or will make, but rest assured, we will be standing up for Evertonians and our great club.
So they've got an appeal that's ongoing for the 10 points, Simon. Yeah. Now today they could be hit with a second one. That can't be right, can it?
Why? These are the rules. Sporting sanctions. It's interesting how they framework it as a sporting sanction that directly affects the fans. No, your mismanagement did that. Right? The consequences of your mismanagement is a set of circumstances that have been brought upon your club. And yes, they do have a reasonable scenario of saying, because I thought they'd get 6 points. I'm surprised they got 10, and they may get 6 points. They may get reduced 6 points in appeal. And then guess what they'll get? They'll probably get 4 points stacked back on top again because they've breached it again. So if they've breached it again, what do you say? You're a recidivist. This is what you do.
Okay, so just go back to the Manchester City point. Okay, you say they're separate entities, and that's fine. 115 breaches going back over a period of 10 or 11 years. Why has that not been resolved? And why has it not been?
There's a variety of reasons, right. And one of the reasons that you allude to is probably one of the reasons, which is the fact that they've got some very high-powered, very sophisticated legal thinking, alongside the fact that UEFA took them to task over these things. UEFA then sanctioned them. It then got overturned by the Court of Arbitration of Sport, and the Premier League seemed to have sat in the background waiting for these precedents to have been set, rather than bearing their own teeth. Absolutely. It's a difficult one because UEFA aren't sanctioning Everton; they aren't after somebody else, and so there's a kind of precedent perspective as who goes first, right? Yeah. I think the Premier League could have gone simultaneously. Yeah. Now, the Premier League have gone after them for 115 charges. It isn't a straightforward principle of they can clearly evidence where the breaches are. It's about the misrepresentation of funds in terms of who put money where and for what reason, what were the commercial value of the sponsorship deals, and all of these things, whereas Everton's are straightforward. They've copped to it. Everton have copped to it. Yeah, we were £10 million over the limit. So we lost 115 million. Well, you actually lost 350 million, and you were allowed to adjust it down to 115, and you still couldn't get it beneath the 105, which, by the way, is no badge of honour. So
Everton have copped to it, as you say, Simon,
because they've been forced to.
They might have to do the same again today.
I'm with you, Martin. I would want Manchester City to be able to, given the fact they're unequivocally innocent, I would want them to be able to account for it quicker. But the evidence behind it and the people that suggest they've got an understanding of the complexity of the case say there is a logical reason why this takes this amount of time. I don't concur. No. But that's what they say.
I know you're closer to it than most, Simon. You can make more sense of it than most. But to the man in the street, this doesn't look right. The look is not good here. Everton, having copped to it once, as you say, may have to do the same again today. Forest are quaking in their shoes, awaiting their fate probably today. But there appears to be no real urgency to take on Manchester City.
They're not waiting their fate today. They've been charged. There was a massive departure from being charged to being found guilty. We see that in every walk of life. What's happened is that the Premier League have tightened up the rules, so you have to produce your accounts by the end of December rather than the end of March, which means they can streamline a process to sanction you during the course of a season, which has been an argument that the clubs themselves have run. They've all said, what's the point of a retrospective situation? We're going to sue, we're going to do this. Well, you can't because you signed up to the rules in the first place. So they've now streamlined it.
Yeah, but they're going to be charged and resolved in the same season. City, as you once said to me, that might not be resolved until the end of the decade.
But not today. But it's not going to happen today. So as we've seen in many other walks of life, what you get charged with and what you get convicted of are often two different things. They will have an ability to be able to put forward very strong and robust defences of the reasons why there should be exceptions made to some of the balance sheet adjustments that they think they're allowed to make, specifically in Nottingham Forest's case, which is the timing of the sale of Brennan Johnson. They'll make the argument they didn't sell Brennan Johnson before June the 30th because if they'd have done that, they'd have got 30 million quid for him. They decided to sell him in the transfer window in August because they can get 50 million pounds because of the critical mass that the transfer window brings when people have got competitive tension to bid for a player and get the price up. They'll argue that should be a post-sheet adjustment, which then gets taken back into the previous year. And Forest are also unfortunate because they only get £61 million of a losses because they're coming up from the Championship. So they've got 2 years of £12.5 million of a losses and 1 year of 35.
OK, we'll look more closely at Forest's predicament the other side of this break, but it's been covered everywhere. The back of the Times this morning, Everton and Forest learn fate today. Everton and Nottingham Forest will discover today whether they have broken the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. We concentrate more on Nottingham Forest at this particular time. Simon, the period under review coincides with Forest promotion to the Premier League, and they're in the eyes of some lavish spending under the owner Evangelos Marinakis,
Martin's mate.
Martin's mate. The club said it had, quote, fully complied with its obligations in a recent statement. Do you think they've got a decent argument?
I think they've got a sustainable argument. Whether they can get across the line, the challenge for Forest is it doesn't cover the period they're in the Premier League. That's one of the 3 years. It covers 20 to 21, 21 to 22, and 22 to 23. Right, and one of those years is the Premier League year. So they only get a small part of allowable losses given the fact they were in the Championship. So ironically, they probably would have got sanctioned in the Championship as well, because it's likely they would have breached the Championship's profit and sustainability rules. Their argument, I believe, will centre on the value of Brennan Johnson and when they decided to sell him to be able to meet the challenges they might have under financial fair play. They would suggest, I think, that selling Brennan Johnson prior to June the 30th of 2023, which was the end of the financial year, which is the third year of the cycle and the part where they're going to get themselves sanctioned, that 3-year cycle, was not a commercially sensible thing to do, because it had got less value for Brennan Johnson than they did when they sold him in August to Tottenham Hotspur for a more inflated fee. They will argue that that should be priced into the thinking of any adjudication that suggests they've contravened financial fair play and breached those rules. I would suggest another argument would be that you've got to sell him for the price that you've got to sell him because you've spent too much money elsewhere. And Everton would also suggest that maybe that argument could have been run in their favour when they had to sell with Richarlison for a slightly lesser fee than they might wanted to, and they provided that evidence, I think. I mean, so that's the reasons why.
Let's say Forest were to fall foul, and that would be extremely hurtful for the likes of yourself, Martin, you know, having done so much for the club in the past. Let's say they fall foul. Is that a message, Simon, that you shouldn't, quotes, give it a go when you get into the top flight, as Marinakis and Forest promised they would do, and indeed did?
No.
I mean, despite all the criticism, maybe Norwich got it right all along. Norwich came up, did next to nothing.
And went down again.
And of course didn't fall foul, but it went down again. Forest came up fighting. We're going to give it a go, but look at where it's got them. Spend 200 million.
Tell it to Jake Humphrey and all the fans at Norwich, they're getting thoroughly fed up with being marooned in the middle of the Championship. You should absolutely give it a go, but you should be able to balance, given that you're professional men, know the obligations upon you. You might not like them. You might not like being told as a businessman, as I damn sure didn't when I walked in the Football League and got told by people that I thought couldn't write their own names on a blackboard what I should do financially. But you do that because that's the nature of the beast. So you sit there and go, right, okay, here's what I've got to do. Now, you know, the balancing act is to be able to meet the obligations at the same time as having a go. Now, of course you're going to fall into the territory. Of course the argument's going to be easy now to land it straight at the owner. Look at the butter mountain of players that you bought that the manager didn't want in the first place, so it's all on you. It's entirely your fault. That will be the narrative. The fact is that if they've got a cogent argument and a salient one, they'll run it. They've got good representation, a representation that very, 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 very rarely loses in DeMarco. So they'll put their best foot forward.
Yeah, but having said that, they're in a pickle and they await their fate today.
They're not going to get their fate today. What they've been is charged. When somebody gets charged, they don't get convicted on the same day, do they?
Yeah, but at the same time, they'll discover whether or not they broke the profit and sustainability rules.
They're being charged.
So they're being charged.
Yeah, but people get charged all the time.
You see, I don't think you get much sympathy for the fan, have you? For the Forest fan or the Everton fan?
No, I've got sympathy. I've got sympathy for all parts of it, but everyone's a contributing factor. Everybody wants their football club to be run better and at the same time wants it to spend as much as it possibly can. If Nottingham Forest had gone up and not spent any money, there'd be a scream and howl from the Nottingham Forest fans suggesting you've been out of the league for 25 years, you didn't have a go. But the flip side of that doesn't give owners the opportunity to be completely and utterly profligate and then reap the whirlwind of those consequences. The bottom line is that if Forest gets sanctioned, if they get sanctioned, will they get sanctioned to the same extent that Everton get sanctioned, if they are to get sanctioned? And is the overriding perspective of football that governance is a bad thing? Because I would suggest that trying to maintain the financial sanity and stability of an industry trumps the individual moments of sack him, buy the best player, get the next ball in. I would suspect it probably trumps those things.
I mean, I reckon fans are scratching their heads, Martin. I really, really do. Because, of course, they want the best for their club. There's a huge excitement. Can you imagine being a Forest fan and up they come? And they are hoping that Marinakis makes the sounds that he made. We're going to go in there full tilt. We're going to give it a serious go because it's all about winning trophies. Music to their ears. The fans pay their money. Of course, that's what they want to hear. And yet today, and he says they're not going to find out their fate today. Well, they'll know today if they have broken the rules. The news will come to them.
I assume that everyone knows the rules in the first place, you know, so maybe they have to abide by them. But it's an interesting dilemma because I think that Norwich City have been accused as a yo-yo club, going up and down.
Like West Brom used to be.
Yeah, that's absolutely going up and down, and you think to yourself, well, if you'd spent a little bit more money, you could have done this. Absolutely. And whatever you say about Marinakis, he spent the money. He went big when they went into the Premier League. And In fact, he was getting a lot of players in the Championship during that time as well too. So somewhere along the way they did spend big, and it bore fruit at the end of the day, because after 23 years they finally made it.
I know it's simplistic to look at it this way, Simon. There's an argument. If your owner's got the money and wants to spend it, let him.
Yes, there is an argument to that. And we've made that argument, and we've rehearsed that argument, and there's merit in capitalism and being allowed to develop businesses. The tragedy of the football world is what you do at the top affects you at the bottom. So whilst you've got the will to do things, if you don't put some controls in place, when Man United or Manchester City or Liverpool or Arsenal are prepared to pay players £300,000 a week, it does affect Forest Green Rovers, because the drip down effect drops. It's a matter of fact. It's not debatable. So the argument is, how do you introduce governance to be able to get some sustainability without allowing clubs to develop so the cartel doesn't maintain? I would suggest in a new ownership model, you allow them some dispensation. So a guy walks in the door, buys a business from another football club owner that looks at it and goes, that's not what I want it to be, that's the way you want it to be. So I want a bit of dispensation to be able to invest some money in over a 3-year cycle so that I can make the business a little bit more like I want it to be. I would suggest that if you give people, when they buy a football club, a slightly different perspective over a couple of years or 3 years, and then they have to fall in line with everyone else, then you don't discourage capital investment, you don't discourage the principal people who have to invest in their business, and you don't maintain the view that others have, which is this is all about protecting the cartel.
It's all about expectations.
So these rules didn't apply when you were owner of Crystal Palace? No, they were just coming in when I was leaving, yeah. And I would have appreciated them, financial fair play, because you can only spend what you've got. So I'd have loved to turn around to fans and say, I'm going to up the season ticket prices because we're all in it together.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the TalkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. TalkSPORT.